Hi, this is Krista Walsh.
Hey, this is Daniel Arthur Smith.
Hey, this is Terry R. Hill.
Hey, it's Josh Hayes, and you're listening to
30-minute author interviews
with my friend Preston Lay.
Woohoo! Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of 30-minute author interviews. There is a giveaway with this week's episode, but before I tell you about it, let me tell you about our two sponsors. First up is The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks. The Galactic Satori Chronicles. A thirst for revenge sends one man on a deadly journey through the galaxy in this adrenaline-pumping new series. Asher is a young man whose world is turned upside down when he discovers that his fiance's death has been directly caused by an imminent alien invasion. Projecting their consciousness into unsuspecting men and women, these aliens are learning exactly how to use humanity's own selfishness and greed as weapons against them. Asher bands together with a group of friends, and these four MIT co-eds are more than meets the eye and go to battle with those who are intent on destroying our planet. Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam. Aliens, politics, and murder. Only the first one is new. When an Earth-based terrorist group targets Hanaria's ambassador, two teenagers become entrapped in the conflict. Alex Vernon is the son of an Earth Independence Party representative and doesn't want to follow his father's path of political manipulation and corruption. Rika Miller is the adopted daughter of an engineer and nurse who later discovers she's not human but Hanarian. Alex must decide between his family loyalties and saving the life of an alien he's been taught to fear and hate, while Rika searches for the truth of what happened to her birth parents. The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks and Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam can both be found on Amazon. Or just head on over to Leigendarium.com, check out the show notes for this episode, and in the show notes we will include a link where you can check out both of these books on Amazon and learn more about them and buy them if you would like to. And now for the giveaway that I was telling you about. This week our guest is author Jon Cronshaw, and he has put together an ebook collection of short stories that takes place in his Wasteland world. And anybody who listens to the podcast can get a copy of it. All you need to do is go to tinyurl.com/30-minute giveaway. That's tinyurl.com/30-minute giveaway. Or just head on over to Leigendarium.com and we'll have a link in the show notes. Welcome everybody to this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. This week our guest is Jon Cronshaw. Thank you for coming on 30-Minute Author Interviews. We appreciate it.
Hey there, good to be here.
Yeah. And thank you for, I know it's kind of getting late for where you're at since you're over in England, so thank you for making time for this. I appreciate it.
No problem.
We like to start each episode off here with a segment that we call Two Truths and a Lie, where you will tell me two truths and a lie about yourself, and I try to guess what the lie is. I'm on a losing streak. I'm going to try to turn it around. So if you could you tell us two truths and a lie about yourself?
Okay. I was an extra in the Red Wedding episode of Game of Thrones, which I'm very proud of. I have a picture of that on my wall. I have a portrait of Michael Jackson in my sitting room, which I painted myself. I'm not a fan of Michael Jackson, but it's there. And I once was a security guard in a school for a tour of Patrick Stewart.
Wow. All of those sound like they could have some cool story behind it. So, normally I have some kind of reason why I'm picking an answer, but today I don't think I'm going to have a reason at all. For some reason, I think I'm going to go with the portrait of Michael Jackson in your living room that you painted as the lie.
Oh, no.
Oh, that one's true?
Yeah, I have a portrait of Michael Jackson that I did when I was about 20. and I did it in the style of Jackson Pollock. It's called Michael Jackson Pollock, and it's still on my wall. So yeah, I have a portrait. Don't like his music particularly, but it's there, and it's a cool image.
Oh, that's cool. So which one was the lie?
I was never in Game of Thrones, unfortunately. I wish I was, but no, not me.
That's the one I was leaning towards. I was like, I don't know though. Game of Thrones is kind of popular right now, and I don't 100% know where it's filmed, so I was hoping.
Me too.
Right. So you got to be security detail for, you said Patrick Stewart?
Yeah, so I used to work as basically mentoring sixth formers, which is, I don't know if you have the kind of same thing. It's the 2 years before you go to university, college kind of thing. I used to mentor sixth formers, and there was one day when Patrick Stewart came to the school because it was his old school, and I ended up having to stop the obsessed kids who, were big Star Trek fans or big Patrick Stewart fans from harassing him, basically. So, yeah, security for Patrick Stewart. Nice.
Did you get to meet him while he was there, any, or did you just have to be security?
Yeah, I didn't get to meet him, unfortunately. He smiled at me. He smiled at everyone, but no, I didn't get to meet him, unfortunately. So just a security detail. I'm a professional, so.
Right, there you go. Well, for my listeners that might not know kind of who you are, what you do, can you give them your little author bio on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I write, I suppose it all falls under the kind of speculative fiction bracket. I write mainly science fiction, fantasy, a bit of just kind of, I suppose it come under weird fiction. I've got 2 novels out at the moment that are post-apocalyptic, kind of dystopian. So yeah, just what is it? Wizard of the Wasteland is the first one of that series, and then I've got the follow-up which just came out called Knight of the Wasteland. So yeah, kind of fusing the fantasy tropes with the post-apocalyptic stuff, which seems to work for some people. So that's good.
When did you get your love for post-apocalyptic fiction?
Oh man, well I think probably since I got into books. I mean, like dystopian, definitely. I think what got me into reading growing up was we did a thing in school. I think I was about 12 or 13, impressionable age. We did, 1984, and The Machine Stops by Ian Forster in a really short space of time. And I asked my teacher, I said, I love this. This is amazing. Is there anything else you'd recommend? And, it was a gateway drug that led me to things like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and Asimov, and then I got obsessed with what I can't remember which one it is. It's like an Asimov Foundation story where they visit this dead planet. I think it's called Aurora, and I was like, I love this idea. So then I got led on to The Postman by David Brin, and then it just kind of, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Just all these kind of end of the world settings, and then I suppose the Walking Dead comics when they were first coming out as well. Just all that kind of. Yeah, got really passionate about it. So, and the original Fallout games as well, actually. So it wasn't just the books; it was the kind of games as well, and just that kind of world, and thinking about what would life be like after pretty much most people have gone. So yeah.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I subscribe to your newsletter, so I get your updates, and I have never heard of this until your newsletter. You are doing. You're currently not you're not to the middle yet. You're getting there. You're doing the Ray Bradbury challenge. Can you tell our listeners what is the Ray Bradbury challenge?
Yeah, I mean I've done 2 Ray Bradbury challenges in parallel. So I'll tell you the first one, which is the one you're familiar with, which is the for 1,000 days, every day you read a short story, a poem, and an essay. The second one is for 52 weeks, you write a short story every week. I've just come to the end of that, so I've written 52 short stories in the past year. So
wow.
Yeah, awesome.
Of those 52 short stories, how many of them do you think you will publish?
Well, there's already quite a few out there, to be honest. I mean, there's a stuff that I've put out in, I didn't intend to put out any short story collections at all, and I've got 3 out. So I've just been doing that. I've been sending, I've got them with like, a 600-second saga. I've picked up a few, and, I'm just sending them out there. And I mean, some of them will never see the light of day because they're awful, but, it's great practice. And, I get a lot of inspiration every single day from all these different stories and ideas I'm exposing myself to. So, yeah, brilliant.
Has there been any author or story that you had never really read until this Ray Bradbury challenge that now you're just a huge fan of because of the challenge?
I would say probably about 95% of the things that I'm reading through this challenge are authors I've never read before. And I'm really pushing myself to read in genres that I've avoided or not read before. So, I mean, I've read, what have I read? I've read things like mysteries and thrillers and erotica even. So it's all been, it's all been there, and it's been a really kind of great experience because I think a lot of genres deal with different aspects of writing in a really useful way. Like I love science fiction and fantasy, but at the end of the day, they're not the best genre for dealing with dialogue. Whereas a thriller or, literary fiction are brilliant at it. So if I can pick up those little things, it's only going to make my writing more stronger. So no, it's fantastic. I'd recommend it to everyone.
So how is the challenge and reading these different genres? Have you applied anything that you've read that has helped your writing?
I mean, yeah, too much. it's everything. It really is. Like, if I listen to a TED talk or I listen to podcasts like The History of the World and 100 Objects and, things about history and ideas and all these things are kind of filtering into what I'm doing. And it's, I'm like, I listened to a podcast a while ago about, what was it? The speed of light and, that kind of time dilation stuff. And I translated that into a story about boredom and kind of gaming subjective time so you can live forever. So you make yourself as bored as possible in order that you live for longer. So it was, yeah, so it's all kind of led to ideas and just kind of sparking little things in my head which wouldn't have been there before. And poetry, I mean, I never used to read poetry at all growing up. I just have memories of sitting and reading Keats and just hating it at school. But, I love Keats now. I've read lots of his poems and I appreciate what he's doing. And I love the fact that you can express things in different ways than just the kind of workmanly way that you get with, fiction. So it's fantastic.
So since you just finished the writing part where you write a short story or something every week for 52 weeks, but you're still reading, do you think you'll start the writing part of it over again and do another story every week?
To be honest, I think I'm going to try and get the third book of this Wasteland finished by November. So.
Right.
So I am focused on, I mean, to be honest, I'll probably realise that I don't know, they've been great practice, but maybe the short stories have been a distraction. And who knows, maybe I'll be one of these, like you get people like Michael Anderle or whatever who are releasing a book a month, maybe I'll be on that kind of rate, who knows.
And that book that comes out in November is called King of the Wasteland. So yeah, I think we do want you to get that one done because I have it pre-ordered, so no pressure.
Yeah. No, it's nearly there. And I've got the, the ending outlined, and then it's just going to be a case of a month of solid edits before it goes to a real editor and then proofreading. So it'll get done. It always gets done. So
you edit your stories before you send it to an editor?
Yeah. I want a cleaner, tighter version of the book as possible before it gets seen by a professional. Basically because it costs a bit less for me because, they usually judge their rates based on the quality of the writing. Mm-hmm. But also it means that when it gets back, I know that it's going to be a good quality thing. I mean, I think the last one that I did, the Night of the Wasteland edits, I think most of the edits in those were things, Oxford commas, apparently. So, yeah, need to keep using those.
Right. Yeah. So what's your process when you edit your own work? I know I've heard some authors will read their stories out loud. Other ones will have their stories read to them. Some just read it to themselves in their head. What's your process when you edit your own?
Right. So, I mean, what I tend to do is I dictate when I write, so I don't really write. I speak it into Dragon, which is a piece of transcription software. And I'd say it's about 95 to 98% accurate. So when I do a scene, when I do a chapter, my initial kind of going over it, once I finish that, is to get rid of any ridiculous errors that the transcription has got wrong. So that's one pass. The second pass is one that I'll do once I've finished the book. And I'll use a program called Pro Writing Aid, which is a plugin that you can buy for Word. And it highlights all the, dodgy sentences or whatever that's gone on, any passive sentences and any redundancies, things like that. Then once I've done that, it goes to a professional editor. And then once it's done that, my wife, she's an English teacher and she's trained to be a proofreader. She then does a proofread and reads it out to me. So I can hear it, and then if there's anything that's going on that I don't like the sound of, because I'm visually impaired, so a lot of my reading is done through audio, so the rhythm of words is really important to me, and if something's not working, then it gets changed, and then that kind of makes a final edit. So that seems to work really well.
And your series is called the Wasteland series. And as we mentioned, you've got or as you mentioned earlier, you have Wizard of the Wastelands, the first one, followed up by Knight of the Wasteland, and there is a prequel you did called Addict of the Wasteland. Where did you originally get your idea for this series?
Okay, it's going to sound really cheesy, but it came to me in a dream. Yeah, it really did. And this has happened again recently. I've got a fantasy series outlined that was based on a dream, and I think I had, the major plot points, a couple of characters, and a cool magic system came to me in a dream. So yeah, trust your dreams, people. So I did. I mean, what was it? It was part of this Ray Bradbury challenge. So I did a short story, one of the first ones I did actually, called Wizard of the Waste, that was basically about this, traveling showman in an apocalyptic setting, going to this village and basically showing off his kind of pre-apocalypse technology, claiming it to be magic, and then he gets killed at the end. That's the short story. Spoiler alert. And that's in my collection called Host and Other Post-Apocalyptic Stories, which is just 3 flash stories, which I just wanted to get out there just so people could see my stuff. And then so I wrote Knight of the Wasteland first, which I did. Well, I did the first draft in a flurry in about a week and a half. We were in the process of moving house. We moved from Leeds, which is kind of in the middle of the country in the north, and then we've moved to the coast now. And while we're packing up the house, I was kind of stuck in Leeds for a little bit, so I just thought, I'll just try and write something. And I ended up having very few nights sleep and just kind of hammering out the first draft of this in a week and a half. Wow. It's like, I could write a prequel to this, could write a little prequel story. So I wrote Addict of the Wasteland. And then this all happened before the Wizard of the Wasteland. And I thought, this could fit in with this. So I then wrote the story, and basically another story kind of fit in between what would have been the original novel. And now I've got the basically three books so far, and then the third book. So it's probably an interesting way of working it, but I think I had more of the kind of world and the characters more established and more kind of figured. And then when I've gone over the kind of a re-edit of the Knight of the Wasteland story, I think I've been able to bring out more of the characters because I know them much better than I did when I wrote it originally. So I think it's worked really well. And to be honest, the second book so far is getting much better reviews on Amazon as well. So I hope that continues.
Oh, wow. You're the way you wrote it reminds me of, I don't know if you've heard of the author Max Gladstone.
I haven't. No.
He has this series called The Craft Sequence, and the first book is called 3 Parts Dead. The second part is called Two Serpents Rise. The next book is called Full Fathom 5, but each number in the title actually tells you where in the timeline it fits in the story. And when I had him on, I asked him, well, why did you do number 3 first and then go to number 2 and then go to number 5? And he said that he wrote the story the way, I think he said the way a storyteller would write it. So he started with this part of the story, but now you need to understand this. So then he went back, and now you need to go here. So I guess it kind of reminds me of the way you wrote your story. You started out with what is now book 2, and then you went to a prequel, and so that's interesting.
Yeah, which is why when you kind of read the series, I think you'll find, like, I purposefully did it, that there's a lot of parallels between the development of the character who's just known as the kid. There's a lot of parallels between his story and Abel's backstory in the Addict of the Wasteland. So yeah, I think it works.
Can you give our listeners the little non-spoiler book blurb on what your Wasteland series is about?
Yeah, it's set a generation after the apocalypse, maybe a little bit more. The people seem to be, there's very few people. We don't know what caused the apocalypse. There's things like craters and poison rains, and there's all horrible stuff going on. There's a drug cartel that enslaves children to make their drugs, and there's a lot of stuff about addiction and dealing with loss and grief, and there's a lot of stuff about religion going through it. The main thing with Wizard of the Wasteland is I mentioned this earlier with the Wizard of the Waste story, but it's essentially our main character, Abel. He joins a travelling showman. He joins this wizard who is going around basically showing off old technology, claiming it's magic, and then getting what he can to survive. And they work together, and they come across this drug cartel who have got this group of enslaved kids, and they go, right, we need to get these kids. So it's basically a rescue mission. I need to rescue these children, and there's all fun and strangeness along the way, and surreal places, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of things for different readers in there. I think there's a lot of layers of storytelling. There's a lot of literary and biblical allusions that some people will get and enjoy, other people won't, and I don't think that affects the story. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of, kind of philosophical stuff, a lot of musing about the self and about addiction and about grief, and just kind of, finding your place and finding hope in a world where there's so much to feel hopeless about. And I think that, that feeling of hopelessness, last summer, for a lot of people in the UK, we had the Brexit thing, and a lot of people in America now are kind of feeling the hopelessness with the Trump administration. And so, I don't know, maybe that kind of feeling of hopelessness and hope, and, the fact that you can find hope in the most terrible of situations and always find something to look forward to is something I believe in. So, I think that's the premise, really.
Very awesome. I remember when I first discovered you as an author I believe it was in the Band of Dystopian group page. It was back in June when you released Wizard of the Wasteland, and the first thing that grabbed me was your cover. And that's one thing people say as an indie author, if you're going to put something out, make sure you get a cover that will grab people. Who did your book covers? It's
a girl in Singapore called Clarissa Yao, and she does Yokla Designs. I know that the people who do the self-publishing podcast have used her a lot, and what I did is I looked for covers that I liked, and then found out who did the cover, and it she kept coming up. And the one, I don't know if you've ever seen John Monk's Hell's Children, the cover to that.
Yeah.
It's the same artist.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was just like, I want that. That is what I want. So, yeah, I sent her the brief of the story, and I was just like, here's what I want. Just, kind of make it look a bit like that, but different enough, and, include the dog as well, because obviously that's important. But yeah, it was this cover, when I saw this cover, I wanted it. So yeah, that was what happened.
Well, she did an amazing job with the covers. They're just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And then of course, once you see the cover, you kind of read the book blurb on what it's about. And I think your take on the post-apocalyptic genre, I like your take on it. I think it's very fascinating. And you said that came to you in a dream. What was the dream about?
If you read the Wizard of the Waste story, that is what the dream is. That
okay.
It's basically pretty much the opening scene of the novel is this guy with a rickety cart, and he's going into this village, and he's displaying, he's getting a hand generator and making this frog come to life like in Frankenstein, and there's all these he shows people binoculars and they're amazed, and so yeah, it was just that was the dream. I have these really kind of vivid dreams. They don't happen very often, but when they do, I take notice and I write them down as soon as I wake up, because I know that they're gold. So, yeah.
Right. Now, did you end up going? I thought I remember hearing on a podcast that you went, or you were thinking of doing the Amazon Kindle Scout with Wizard of the Wasteland.
Oh,
did you end up going that route?
I did, yeah. I did really well with it, to be honest. It didn't get chosen by Amazon, which wasn't my intention. I think I mentioned this because I think this will be like the self-publishing podcast, Paul Teague's podcast that was on when I was talking about this. But basically, the Kindle Scout thing it was part of my marketing strategy. It was my way I could talk about the book, because I if you're online and you're involved in indie publishing, there's so many spammers out there. There's so many people just posting, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. And I didn't want to be one of these authors. But at the same time, I know I've got to sell books. So I wanted an excuse to be able to talk about the book without asking people to buy it. And, if it did get chosen, to get a free copy. And yeah, no, that was basically why I did it. I thought it was a great way to kind of communicate with people about what I was doing without being spammy and salesy. So yeah, that was it.
Oh, that's cool. And then I read in another interview you did, a written interview, that you have met some, I guess, powerful people, you could say.
Yeah.
Can you tell us who you've met, and then did they influence any of the characters in your novels?
I couldn't possibly say. Let me think. Okay, I used to work as a political reporter, and so it was just for a local paper in Halifax, but it just so happened that the Conservative Party decided to launch the 2015 election in Halifax. So I got to interview David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister. I got to interview the Chancellor, got to interview Boris Johnson, and all these kind of, political bigwigs were there, and, people like Eddie Izzard, the comedian, came up because he's a big Labour supporter. And so I got to meet all these cool people. And, did I base any characters on them? Yes, because I did things like court reporting, where I'd go into courtrooms and see murder cases and see just people squirming and lying, and just all these sides of humanity that, you wouldn't get if you just kind of didn't put yourself... who goes and sits in a courtroom, really? That's not something most normal people do, but, it was part of my job, and, I just learnt a lot about people and following the politics, and just doing all the kind of, the basic kind of lower down stories that you do, where you go and interview, I don't know, children who've done charity work, and all people who are doing stuff and passionate. And if that doesn't come through in my work, then I don't know how it isn't. I don't base characters directly on people. Perhaps certain traits and certain turns of phrase might make the way into it. But I mean, there's no one who is a complete analog of this person or that person. It's always more subtle, like motivations or, just as a kind of shorthand for me when I'm kind of digging into a character to get to know them before I write. Because I usually end up writing, a short story with a character like I did with the Wizard of the Wastes, just to kind of get into I suppose it's like an actor getting into the role where they'll practice it. And that's kind of what I do. Because for me, it's, people don't remember plots, people remember characters. And so for me, characters kind of the what makes stories memorable, and what hopefully will be what makes people come back to what I'm writing. So yeah,
right. How many books do you see your Wasteland series going?
I mean, I don't know. It's this is the thing. I mean, doing this Ray Bradbury challenge, and as I said, I had this dream the other day where I had a great idea for a fantasy series, and I've got a world building Bible and another fantasy series. So I've basically cannot catch up with my ideas. So I envisage. I mean, it's possible that I'll stop at book 3. Really, I think there's at least another book in it, and there's possibly 6. But I think because I've already laid out tiny hints at something else that's going on with this world. And if they don't get resolved, they don't get resolved. But if I do go to book 4, then it will almost be a second trilogy where this kind of big revelation will occur, and then it'll go forward from there.
Very nice. Well, I know I look forward to seeing where you take the series. So for the listeners that might be interested in your world and reading more about your Wasteland world, you have created, for all the listeners that would like it, a short story collection called Stories of the Wasteland. Could you just kind of tell the listeners about that collection, the Stories of the Wasteland, and what they might be able to expect to find in that if they would like to get a copy of it?
Sure. So, I mean, the Stories of the Wasteland, I mean, I've got 3 short story collections out and novellas and, free stuff that I've given out to my newsletter subscribers. So just for your listeners, I've put together a collection, Stories of the Wasteland. It's got my prequel novella, which is Addict of the Wasteland. I've got another story set in a world called Prisoner of the Wasteland. I've got another short story called To Grip the Bright White Chains, which is the story that kind of inspired all of the Ples stuff, which is the kind of addiction and drug side of the Wasteland stuff. And then I've got a few other just kind of apocalyptic and dystopian flash fiction stories in there as well. So it'll just give people a taste of my writing and, the different ideas that I'm having in terms of, the apocalyptic genre, and I think where it can go. So, I mean, it's really easy to download. If you've got a smartphone or a Kindle or anything like that, just visit. It's tinyurl.com/30-minute giveaway. So go on there. It takes you to a book funnel page and it will guide you through. Basically, they're great there. So if you have any issues, get in touch with them. They'll get you the book.
And I'll also include a link to that over in the show notes at Leigendarium.com, where you can just click and go there as well. So however you want to go about getting it, I highly recommend you check it out and check out this amazing world that you've created with the Wasteland. So you mentioned your sci-fi dream that you had. Will you put that out under your name, Jon Cronshaw, or do you think you're going to... I heard in that also podcast you've thought about using a pen name for some other stories. So would you put this under your name or under a pen name?
I might have a alter ego out there. Yeah, he's released about 6 stories, and I've got an audiobook in production. Basically, I write. I mean, this is the thing. It's like the author. I've designed the author as a character, kind of embodying everything I hate about people. So he is an obnoxious, like the author himself is an obnoxious, just the worst person ever. And he writes these kind of really pulpy, trashy 1950s golden age sci-fi adventures. And his name's Herschel K. Stroganoff, and the stories are called the Herc Braveman Adventures, and it's kind of, I don't know, a bit like Zap Brannigan meets Archer, and just don't read it. it's all I'm saying. It's grossly offensive on many levels, so I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. In fact, please don't buy that book.
That's funny. Oh, well, here at the Leigendarium, we are, in 30-minute author interviews, we are known for a certain question, and that question is, a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he here?
I am the harbinger of death. Bow before me.
Nice. Can
I ask you, actually, I mean, while we're on the subject of dreams, I mean, the penguin with a sombrero, I mean, I think Sigmund Freud might have a field day with that one. Is that something from one of your dreams, or, I mean, where's
no. When I originally started my blog before I had the podcast, I had a written interview that I did with authors, and I called it 10 Questions With. And when I was putting the questions together, I was Googling interesting interview questions, great questions to ask authors, and I just looked up several different things on Google, trying to find questions that I thought would be interesting to ask authors in this 10 questions and have them answer the same 10 questions every week, a different author. And so on one of the posts I read, I think I looked up like funny interview questions because I didn't want the whole thing to be completely serious, because I like to have fun. And one of the questions someone said that they were asked during a job interview was the penguin question. And I was like, that is hilarious. I'm going to add that. And so I had the penguin question in my written interviews. Then I started the podcast. And for the first couple episodes, I didn't do the penguin question. And I had some people send me a message and say, where did the penguin go? And so I brought the penguin back.
So it's kind of your albatross as well as a penguin. So.
Yep. So, yeah, I've had a fan send me a penguin, a little beanie baby penguin. I had an author that was on here hand crochet a penguin wearing a sombrero.
Wow.
So I guess now, my spirit animal's a penguin now, I guess. So I am the penguin. Or I guess I shouldn't say that. Batman might come through the door if I say that. But yeah, that's where it came from.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Before we leave, I like to ask the one question I kind of like to. The final question is: do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with the listeners?
Honestly, the best bit of advice I would give to anyone, this isn't just for writers, is don't be afraid to daydream. I have come up with some of my best ideas when I've not been looking at screens, when I've not been listening to stuff, when I've just allowed my mind to wander. And I don't think we give ourselves enough time or permission to do that, and we should.
I think that's some good advice. And where can our listeners go if they would like to learn more about you or the books and stories that you've created?
There's JonCronshaw.com. That's JonCronshaw.com. That's two unconventional names, which I should have thought about before. There's obviously my Amazon page as well, which is amazon.com/author /Jon Cronshaw. I'm on Twitter. It's at JL Cronshaw, because somebody else took Jon Cronshaw. And there's facebook.com/Jon Cronshaw author. So, yep, I'm pretty much around there. But, yeah, best place to go would probably be my website, and there's a mailing list there where I kind of, write about what I'm releasing and just kind of little other bits and pieces, and there's always free stories and, links to friend books and things like that. So, that's probably the best place. And I do respond to emails, so, yeah.
Yeah, you do, because that's how I got in touch with you. So, one final question I wanted to ask you before we go. So far this year, according to dates on Amazon, you have released 6 titles, with the King of the Wasteland coming out in November being your 7th title you've released this year. Wow. What can readers expect from you in 2018 or the rest of 2017? Because that's a lot of stuff to put out in 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the first. It's weird, Paul Teague, because I'm going to be back on Paul Teague's podcast. I think it's coming out on Monday, and he mentioned that number to me. He says, "Oh yeah, you've got 6 titles." I was like, "Really? Have I?" I thought, "Oh yeah." So it's weird. Like, I've only really counted to myself the 2 novels because I was doing the short stories as a kind of side thing. So yeah, I didn't really count them until formatting them, put them together, and get them out. But yeah, I mean, realistically, I'm looking at, I don't know, I'd like to have a trilogy a year. I mean, I've got ideas for standalone novels as well, and I've bought a cover for a standalone novel, so I need to write that really. So there's lots of things in the pipeline, lots of ideas, lots of stuff outlined. I just need to kind of get the James Patterson gimmick going, I think, where I just, write the outline and just get someone else to do it, and then I can go on. So, if anyone's interested.
That's funny. Yeah, hit them up. Well, that's awesome. Good luck. I hope you do put out a trilogy a year. I think that's an awesome goal if you can do it. So good luck with all of that. We will put links to your website and everything over at Leigendarium.com, and head there to check out that collection that we told you that he's given away for our listeners. Stories of the Wasteland. We'll have the link over there for that as well. Thank you for taking time out of your evening and coming on 30-minute author interviews. We appreciate it.
Hey, it's been a pleasure.
It has. It's a lot of fun. That is all the time that we have for this episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you tune in on Friday when we're going to be interviewing author Jen Phillips. And don't forget to head on over to Leigendarium.com and find the show notes for this episode. In the show notes, you're going to find the giveaway where everybody gets an ebook copy of Stories of the Wasteland. It's a collection of short stories that takes place in Jon Cronshaw's Wasteland world. Also in the show notes, you're going to find the link to our sponsors, the Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks, and also Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam. And don't miss another episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, and wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I would also like to thank a few of our Patreon supporters. I would like to thank Third Scribe, Maggie Stewart Grant, and Nick Breaker. They're supporting 30-Minute Author Interviews through Patreon. They are also receiving the Patreon-only podcast 10 Questions With. Visit patreon.com/Leigendarium and find out how you can support 30-Minute Author Interviews for as little as $1 a month. Until next time, stay legendary.